Okay, we're in Siman Kuf Hey Halacha Gimel. If you're watching by video, my camera's not working for some reason, so you have to just listen to me. So at the very end of the din, the Rama says, you're not allowed to pour oil into a candle that's burning animal fat, either treif animal fat, he says, or chaylev, the fats of a kosher animal, which you're not allowed to eat. So you're not allowed to pour oil into the candle. I guess you want the candle to burn longer, and you can't pour it into or whatever. You can't pour it into a candle. So the candle is treif. The thing you're pouring into is kosher. As Rama says, l'chatchila you're not allowed to pour from one to the other. Okay, so what's going on? What's going on in this din? So it comes from a bunch of Mishnayos in Machshirin, which Mordechai brings, and it says like this: the Mishnayos have nothing to do with Kashrus. Mishnayos are talking about, as you can imagine, Tumah and Taira, and we're talking about like this: a person is pouring something tahar into something tamei. Okay, so the thing that I'm pouring in is tahar, the thing that I'm going into is tamei, and the question is, does the thing on the top somehow become tamei because of what you're doing over here? So the Gemara says, the Mishnah says, the way the Gemara explains it, that the rule is like this: if the top and the bottom one are both hot, it doesn't become tamei. If the top and the bottom one are both cold, it doesn't become tamei. If the bottom one is cold and the top one is hot, it doesn't become tamei. The only case that becomes tamei is if the bottom one is hot and the top one is cold. Okay, that's or cold meaning ambient, not hot. Okay, that's the only case where it becomes tamei when the bottom one is hot and the top one is cold. Except for the Gemara says two exceptions, a special kind of honey, but ignore those exceptions for now. Not important to us. And all that counts is if the bottom one is hot, the top one is cold, then the top one becomes tamei. And the reason is it's similar to the din of Tato Gavar, that somehow the heat from the bottom makes it spread up to the top and somehow makes it become tamei on the top. And that idea that has to do with Tato Gavar, it happens to be that Taz speaks it out straight out, that has to do with that. But that's why it's in Halacha Gimel, in Siman Kuf Hey Halacha Gimel, which was the din of Tato Gavar. So at the end, the Ramah sticks in that there's this connection, this other din that relates to Tato Gavar. Now that the din over there is not talking about Kashrus, there in Machshirin, but it's a din that we call Nitzuk Chibur, something that's connected as if it's through pouring makes things become connected to each other, and therefore the tumah spreads from the bottom to the top. Now we're going to come in a second why that has to do with Kashrus. Malam is like this: the Mishnah, that's the case that we're talking about over here. That the thing on the bottom is tamei, or in our case treif, and the thing on the top is tahar. Okay, but the truth is that the Mishnah Machshirim says another din. It says what happens if the top one is tamei and the bottom one is treif. Now, the normal case of the top one being tamei and the bottom is
tamei, the bottom is treif.
I'm sorry, the top one is tamei and the bottom one is tahar. Sorry, the bottom one is tahar. Okay, so now normally that doesn't mean anything. If the top one is tamei, you're pouring the tamei into the tar, then of course the tar is going to become tamei. Okay, so that by the normal case is the case I told you now, which is that the bottom one is the one that's tamei, and therefore we have to think about maybe it's somehow causing tumah to the top one somehow. But if you're pouring from the top one into the bottom one, then it will be automatic that the bottom one will be tamei. So the case that the Mishnah says is that you're pouring something, but what's tamei is not what you're pouring. What's tamei is the person who's holding the thing on the top. Okay, the person in their hand is what's tamei. So the stream, the liquid pouring into the bottom one is not itself tamei, because else it would make the whole thing tamei. The point is that the person who's holding on the top, the hand of that person is what's tamei. And the Mishnah says there we also say Nitzuk Chibur. The fact that there's this connection between the bottom and the top means that the tumah spreads downwards also. It doesn't just spread upwards. Once there's a connection based on this Tato Gavar, the tumah spreads downwards also. Okay, so which is if we think about it from the perspective of the Tato Gavar perspective, that's what we say about Tato Gavar also. But Tato Gavar, if the bottom one is hot and the top one is cold, then Tato Gavar says that there's a complete transfer between the two of them. Okay, so that case is a very unusual case, and it is specific for tumah, where the top person could be tamei, but what's pouring in is not tamei. Okay, for kosher and treif, it wouldn't make sense. If I was pouring treif liquid into kosher liquid on the bottom would be treif because you just pour treif into the kosher. Okay, that would be obvious that would be treif. But and that's why that part of the Mishnah is not brought here in Yardea. not brought in your day. It is brought in the Rambam in Hilchos Tumas Eichlin because it's the truth. But it's just not brought in and not negate to our case because in a normal situation it's hard to, we can't imagine a case where that would be relevant. Okay, but I came up with a case. Okay, I have a case. What I mean, a case that Shulchan Aruch wouldn't have said. Don't feel bad. The case we have a case of it, and that is like this. We don't kasher glass. We're Ashkenazim. We don't kasher or use glass that became treif. So if you want to kasher a microwave, one of the things that we tell people that you have to do is you take the glass plate out because you can't kasher it. It's treif. Okay, so take the glass plate and put it on the side. Okay, but there's another piece of glass in the microwave, and that is in the door of the microwave is made out of glass. So why aren't we concerned that they have this glass door that's there that we can't that can't be kasher and can't be used as a shape? No, I'm not sure. No, you're right. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay, in my mind it's glass, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's plastic. Okay, so then I will continue as if it's glass. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. We'll go try it afterwards and see what it is. So questions like this. So now the usual things we think about in a microwave are zeya, which is to say, I'm going to be talking more in a minute to you about zeya, how zeya and Nitzuk Chibur connect, what they have to do with each other. But we think of zeya. So zeya is well, the plate became treif because things pour onto it. That's obvious. But zeya is that when I cook a piece of pizza in my microwave, then the steam that rises up from that goes and makes everything milchiks. Okay, the steam that hits other things makes it milchiks, and that makes the door milchiks also. Or let's say chametz, it makes it milchiks. But how would that milchiks get back into the next thing that I make into there? Or how would that chametz get back into the next thing? So the Ramah says the only way things get back from the top to the bottom, it has to drip down. Well, that's why the door is okay, because it can't drip down from the door. Because when it drips down from the door, it hits the floor. It doesn't hit my food. So we could ignore the fact that the door might not have been kasher because it was glass, because the door might in fact be treif or chametzik or milchiks or whatever was bad about the door. But the blear from that door can't get into my food because things going to drip vertically and they drip down to the floor. Okay, so that would be why we wouldn't care about it. But if we have to worry about Nitzuk Chibur, then it's a problem because now we have a door that's treif, was never kashered. We have the thing on the bottom that's the thing on the bottom is hot, pouring up. Giving off liquid off to the door, and the door. Now we don't have to worry about zayed dripping back down. But if there's Nitzuk Chibur, here we have an example. What the Mishnah said. We have the top thing is tamei. In our case, the top thing is treif. The bottom thing is kosher or tahar, and there's a pot. We should have Nitzuk Chibur. The Ramah said lechatchila shouldn't do it. Okay, so but the evidence okay, and maybe that's why we're not makbid on it, because it's only a lechatchila and it's only glass, and glass we're only makbid on. It's only chumrah.
Why are you calling the door the top, the bottom?
Because the zayed comes from the chametz, let's say that I made in there, goes up to the door. It hits the glass door. Is it connected from the bottom, from the chametz is sitting over here, and it heats up the door that's over here. So
the higher part of the door.
Anything above the piece of pizza. I mean, anything on the upper side. So we have that's hot on the bottom and cold on the top.
Liquid. You talking about because the liquid connecting, or you talking about considering the zayah?
I'm talking about the zayah. I'm thinking about the zayah as the connection.
The zayah to be a connection. Is that partial? That zayah is like liquid.
I thought it was. I guess you could argue with me on that.
I would think it has to be like intense zayah, like inside a pot or something like that. Not stam any little wisp of zayah is considered to be a chibur.
Okay, maybe that's the answer. So the answer you think is that it's since it's only
maybe microwave qualifies.
Okay, maybe it's what to think about. I just was trying to think of an example of this mishnah that it's not brought in your day. Again, it's in Tumas Eichlin. It's there because it's a real din. I mean, it's a mishnah. But for us, okay. Anyhow, so the Mordechai back to this din of Nitzuk Chibur. The Mordechai says that just like you can't pour tamei into tahar when the bottom one is tamei, when the bottom one is hot and the top one is cold, so too the same thing for kosher and treif. You can't pour cold liquid into a hot treif on the bottom because of Nitzuk Chibur. Okay, that's what the Mordechai says, and he says therefore you should do it. You're not allowed to do that. Okay, now what I'm about to explain is one version of what pshat in this Mordechai is. Comes from the Shulchan Zedeshin. Gra brings it in Shulchan Aruch. That this is the Shulchan Zedeshin, at least the way I understand it. That's what he understands the Mordechai. At the end, I'm going to tell you the Pri Megadim has a different way of understanding the Mordechai. Okay, but I'm going to explain to you the way I think, which to me is one that makes sense, is the way the Shulchan Zedeshin understands it, like this. Now, when I first heard this din, you hear this din of Nitzuk Chibur, he says, wait, that sounds like a very familiar din. It sounds like the din that I mentioned already today, which is that's my phone. Sorry about that. Okay, that was my phone ringing. Oh. It sounds this din of Nitzuk Chibur sounds exactly like the din of Zeya. Okay, which is brought in Simon Tzadi Beis. We have it. It's in Simon Chof Ches also. Chof Ches also. We talked about this, which is when we have something treif and hot vapor comes out of it and it hits something on top, it makes a treif. So that sounds awful like this din of Nitzuk Chibur, right? Sure, sounds like the same thing. When we have something hot on the bottom and it connects with liquid up to the top, then we have this problem of Nitzuk Chibur. Sounds like really like exactly like the same thing that we have called Zeya. But there's something obviously. It's obviously not correct. Obviously, this is not the din of Zeya, and the reason is because very clear. Because if it was a din of Zeya, the din is that Zeya makes things treif. Doesn't only make it lechatchila. The Ramah says only lechatchila you shouldn't do it, but b'diavad it's fine. Okay, that's not Zeya. Zeya makes it treif even b'diavad. So obviously, this is not. We're not talking about that. There's a possibility of Zeya over here. We're talking about there's something else going on over here. We're talking.
Is Mordechai didn't say clearly that if they're both hot, it's fine?
Does he? I don't remember, but he connects to the Mishnah. I'm assuming he does because that's what the Mishnah say there.
So then really, by Kashrus, you don't have such a thing.
Right. So something's telling us that this is not the same din. That is not the same din as Zeya. When I tell you more about the Truma session, you'll see that that's correct. It's not din of Zeya. So and the reason is because by the din of Zeya, the din is it's only true when the vapors that are coming up are still hot when they hit the top thing, or like you said, if the top thing itself is hot. Okay, that's the only time they agree transfer of time. If the thing that hits on the top is by the time it gets to the top, it's cold, then there's no din of Zeya. Zeya is only when it's hot. By the time it touches it, because time doesn't transfer that heat. Okay, so when this Zeya is talking about when it's hot from here to there. Okay, but we're talking about when it's not hot from here to there. Okay, like think about the case. The Rama says you're pouring oil into a hot candle. Okay, so the candle's hot. But that's not heating up the pot of oil on top. The heat is not getting all the way up to there, or in many cases not going to be. So then we only have this din lechatchila that you're not supposed to do that. Okay, so the Mordechai is saying that it's usher, even though there's no Zeya, even though there's no tam transferring through the heat. You have to because you can't do it because. You can't do it because of like this Nitzuk Chibur. And the Ramah is saying is most of the other Rishonim don't agree with the Mordechai. I just told you what the Mordechai says. Other Rishonim don't agree with what the Mordechai said. Okay, so they hold that no, it's a din for tumah. I'll tell you what they hold in a second. Okay, and so therefore lechatchila you can't do it because it was choshish for the sheet of the Mordechai, but the evidence is perfectly fine. Okay, so again, so it's not Zeya because it's not a case of Zeya has to be the case of the Ramah there is you have your salami drying on top of your pot of milk. So if it's still hot when the vapors on the milk hit the salami, then it's treif. But if it's not, then it's not be. But Nitzuk Chibur says no, it could be a problem even without that, or at least l'chatila could be a problem. Okay, so the if you look, there's a okay. I forgot to tell you. Okay, let me tell you this for now. I'll go back to it in a second. Truma Sedeshin, they asked him 3 questions. Okay, they said to him, "Tell us when you do this din of Zeya, how far away should it be? How far away is it a chashash? I mean, if you have a problem with Zeya is rising up from in the case of Shulchan Aruch, in the case of Milchig, and the shlation on top, how hard do you have to worry about Zeya? Okay, and then they said to him another shayla. They said to him, what happens if you do Nitzuk Chibur? How hard does that have to be one from the other one? And what happens? Is this the Nitzuk Chibur by everything or only by certain things? Okay, those are the 3 questions they asked the Truma Sedeshin. And Truma Sedeshin says for Zeya, for Zeya, it has to be Yatzled this boy. He said, Nitzuk Chibur? No, it's only a din for in Machshirin and nothing to do with us. I mean, so he's being very clear that Zeya and Nitzuk Chibur are not the same dinim. He said, Zeya, as long as it's hot when it gets to the top. Nitzuk Chibur? Nah, that's a din for Tumah V'Tayra. Nothing to do with us. Okay, which is what the Ramah is paskening. He's saying, really, Ikra din I hold like this Maril. I think maybe it comes from Mr. Heter, I might be wrong about that. That it's only a din for Tumah V'Tayra, or a certain other case I'll get to in a second. But we for this Mordechai who says that it's even for them for kosher and treif also. Okay, now the I'm telling you that's what the Truma Sedeshin learns. That's how I believe it. I think that's a simple way to understand. I don't think that the Pri Megadim learned this way. Okay, I think the Pri Megadim did not learn this way. I thought that the way I read it is that he thinks it's just another example of Zayah, just another example. There's a possible the Shach makes it a little bit sound like that, but I think that the Pri Megadim is reading it that way. I think that he's reading it that way. But the Pri Megadim doesn't tell us. So why is it mutter b'diavad? Right? He doesn't tell us that part. According to the translation, we understand why it's asl lechatchila, but mutter b'diavad. Lechatchila b'choishes for the shita, b'diavad we're not choishes for the shita. Okay, we're sort of used to that kind of things. You know what I mean? Only choishes for the shita lechatchila. If it's a problem of zayah, then either it's mutter or it's asr. It's not lechatchila and b'diavad. And the sim inside the base is not like that. Also, the Pri Megadim himself asks on himself. He says, "Wait a second. If this is a din that has to do with zayah, then it should be worse if the top one is hot." Okay, like you said before, it should be worse if the top one is hot, and that's not the din here. The din here is it's only if the bottom one is hot and the top one is cold. But l'chayr, the din should be worse if the top one is hot. Okay, so he asks on himself, but he doesn't give an answer. Okay, and that's really a question, just a Lishit Tassi question. I don't know Lishit Tassi, just a funny question, because if you open up in Aruch in Hilchos Pesach, so it's in the halachas of Erev Pesach Chab Shabbos. Okay, so Erev Pesach Chab Shabbos is this unusual day when you're eating chametz, but you really have to stop eating chametz by a certain time. So you don't want to leave over. You don't want to leave over chametz after a certain time in the day because you won't be able to get rid of it because Erev Pesach Chab Shabbos you can't burn it. So so what happens is that you want to cook your food in Pesach dishes. That's what you want to do. But you want to eat on chametz dishes, or you may want to eat on chametz dishes if they didn't have disposables. You might want to eat on chametz dishes because you're going to be eating some chametz, like you're eating chal, that's going to be chametz. So you're eating on chametz dishes, but you want your pots to be pesadik because you want to have, if you have leftovers, or you want to not have to clean the pot afterwards because you won't be able to get rid of the chametz for Pesach. So you cook food that's be'etzem kosher Pesach, and your plates are chametzik. So the Pri Megadim says, don't pour from the hot Pesach pot into the cold chametz dish because of a problem of Nitzuk Chibur. Okay, that's what he says, and the Sharitim actually brings it in Hilchos Pesach. But you shouldn't do this, and I don't understand it because Nitzuk Chibur. That's not a case of Nitzuk Chibur. Nitzuk Chibur is only when it's hot on the bottom and cold on the top. And here it's the opposite. It's hot on the top and cold on the bottom. You're putting from the pot into your dish. So you're taking soup from the hot pot into the cold plate. I didn't understand why he said that. So I can't help you with that. But the Pri Megadim himself asks on himself. Pri Megadim in your day asks on himself. He says, why shouldn't Nitzuk Chibur be a problem if the top one is hot? So he leaves it as a question. But I'm saying to you, it's even a question from the other side, which is, why does he tell you in Hilchos Pesach that you shouldn't pour hot food into your chametz plate? Why not? That's not Nitzuk Chibur. I don't get that.
So what's the two separate questions?
One question is, if Nitzuk Chibur and Zayah are the same thing, then it shouldn't only be true if the bottom one is hot and the top one is cold. It should be if the bottom one is hot and the top one is hot, it should for sure be true. That's one thing. The second is, we accept it. Look, whatever reason is, that's what the Nitzuk Chibur is that top one has to be cold and the bottom one has to be hot. So then why would the Pri Megadim tell you that there's Nitzuk Chibur in the opposite case, where the top is hot and the bottom is cold? He goes to an opposite case and he goes to Nitzuk Chibur. No, that's not Nitzuk Chibur. No, that's specifically not that case and like that. Okay, so I it's just strange. I'm saying, you open Aruch Chaim, he says this, I'm thinking Sharitim tells you to do this. On Erev Pesach Chab Shabbos, whenever that can happen in how many years, you shouldn't do that. Don't pour your I mean, probably with disposables in here, but if you have real plates, you know that, okay. Anyhow, so I forgot to mention the din of Nitzuk Chibur only applies. I forgot who says this. I forgot who I'm quoting now. Only applies when it's liquids. Okay, it doesn't apply if there's no connection between the two things. So, for example, the case I tell you, if a person would pour just a powder from one thing to the other one, there wouldn't be Nitzuk Chibur. Nitzuk Chibur is the case the Rama says you pour liquid from one thing into the other, from the top to the bottom. So the example I come up with of where Nitzuk Chibur we negate to us, again, it's only us l'chatchila. I keep telling you the Mordechai says it's us even b'diavad. It's really us. It really makes it food treif. The Rama says it's us l'chatchila. So we have the example we have of this is if you're cooking something that's milchugs or fleishigs, most people are not cooking treif, milchugs or fleishigs, let's say you have cholent, okay, and you pour almost exactly the Rambam's case. You pour oil into the cholent. Okay, so you take oil out of a jar, out of a bottle of oil, and you pour the oil into your fleshig cholent. So the bottom is fleshigs, bottom is fleshigs, and it's hot, and the top is cold. So if you're pouring it in, then you're doing what the Rambam says you weren't supposed to do lechatchila. You're doing Nitzuk Chibur from a. I'll have to tell you another case. From the bottom, which is hot, to the top, which is cold. That b'diavad it's not going to make your oil treif unless it was zeh, unless it's so hot that it's yad to even up to the top there. But lechatchila, you're not supposed to do that. Lechatchila, it affects.
This is just lechatchila that you're then gonna use the oil for milk. That's all. Right? It's not the same.
Oh, that's right. It's not the same as you're right. It's not the same as the Shulchan Aruch's case because the Rambam's case is where it became treif. The candle is treif, right? So that's true. The candle is worse because it became
treif. Maybe it's not also.
So you say don't worry about lechatchila because what's going to happen, the worst that's going to happen is it'll just be fleshigs as much. So it'll become fleshigs. And then I'm going to use it. Maybe I'm going to use it for milk. Okay, but if you have one bottle of oil, then that's it. Then you're going to use it for milk. That's what's going to happen. Okay, but it's what to think about. It wouldn't be a problem if you wanted to pour powders. If you wanted to put salt and pepper into your cholent, you could do that, unless it was a zayah problem. Unless the zayah got up so high that it was still hot. As long as there's no zayah problem, then you could do that because that's a powder. That's not Nitzuk Chibur. It's a problem only be liquids. Okay, so I forgot to mention there is another case where Nitzuk Chibur comes in, and that is the Trumas Deshen. When he talks about Nitzuk Chibur, he says, I forgot to tell you this. He says, it only applies for the Tumah V'Taira, and one other case. He says, and the reason why he says it only applies by Tumah V'Taira is because Tumah V'Taira depends on touching. Nitzuk Chibur. When there's Nitzuk, it's touching each other. Kasher and treif doesn't depend on touching. Kasher and treif depends on tam transferring. For tam to transfer, we need heat, and there's no heat, so there's no tam transferring. So for Tumah V'Taira, we say the fact that it's hot on the bottom and cold on the top, whatever it means, it needs a chibur. However it works, somehow some tug version. It's as if they're touching each other. Okay, if they're touching each other, so now the tumah from the bottom spreads to the top through touching. Touching doesn't make tam. If I put a treif piece of meat against a cold potato, it's not treif. Nothing. They just touch each other. Nothing happens to them. So he said it's only for that. And then there's another case where it's going to get to also, and that is for wine, because wine. If a guy touches wine, it also makes it treif, makes it stam yayin. So their touching connection is important also, and therefore there's a din that if you have stam yayin in a cup and you pour wine from a kosher wine into that bottle, into that cup, then there's Nitzuk Chibur. Then there it's not the guy touching per se, but his treif wine is touching. Touching makes a difference for stam yayin, and therefore it's as if they're touching each other, and then the wine in the top in the bottle becomes treif also. Okay, so it happens to be this is negeh. We've talked about this once. This is negeh if you have a wine tasting. Okay, see, or you have a kosher restaurant and they serve non-mavushal wine. So if you so what they do at a wine tasting, they pour wine into little cups and everyone gets to taste it. Okay, no problem. If a guy walks in and tastes the wine, no problem. So he makes his wine treif, but that's his problem. Then as soon as we rinse the cup out before we wash it with hot water. But what happens if he asks for a refill? Okay, or what happens if you come to the table and you want to serve wine to everyone at the table, and one of the people at the table is not a Jewish person. So now when you pour the wine into his cup, when he lifts up his cup, he's going to make his wine treif, and then it's Nitzuk Chibur back to the stuff in the bottle. So it's not a matter that he made his own wine treif. He's not Jewish. He doesn't have to keep kosher, but he makes the whole bottle.
Again, I thought it was only if it's hot. Wine's hot.
So that's a question. One of the questions on this is, but the din is this. The Trumas Deshen says it's again to that case. Okay, but it's a question. It's like really, but the whole din of machshin is only when the bottom one is hot. Okay, but if you look in your day where this din is brought about Nitzuk Chibur is brought in that part of your day, but in Hilchos Klayayin, it doesn't say anything about hot and cold. So I'm scratching my head because the Trumas Deshen, which it comes from, says that we only have to be choishes for mishnais machshirim for Tumah V'Taira and for wine, and therefore it's brought in Hilchos Stam Yayin that the wine becomes treif through Nitzuk Chibur. The wine in the bottom becomes treif. Why does the wine in the bottom become treif? Where's the heat on the bottom, cold on the top? There's missing in that case also. And then there's another question on that also, is that if you look at that din, if you look at the din Hilchos Klayayin, in Hilchos Stam Yayin, guess what? It doesn't say that the top one becomes treif. It doesn't say it. Basically, it automatically becomes treif. It says we look at it as if the wine on the bottom is mixed into the wine on the top, and therefore the wine on the top becomes treif. So the Rama says, but what happens if there was so little left on the bottom that it would be bottled into the wine that's on bottled b'shishim into the wine that's on the top? Then the wine top is kosher. Okay, it's as if the bottom stuff is mixed into the top stuff, and since it's mixed in, mixed in could be bottled. If it's bottled, then it'll be mutter. What does that have to do with anything? If it has to do with touching, like the Truman says, it's because they're touching each other, so it just makes it treif. It doesn't.
Why? There's no halacha that stam yain that touches kosher wine makes it treif.
Well, but that's what the Truman session is saying.
The goy makes it treif.
That's true. The Truman session is saying that didn't Nitzuk Chibur works over here also. That the touching, since this is a din that depends on touch, it has some. It doesn't have to be blia. It has to touching is part of the din, so it applies here also. Even though you're right, it's not the guy touching. But so then, why is it anything?
Somehow I can get treif wine touch
kosher wine doesn't do anything.
Not mix. It's not gonna. Ask
it shouldn't. So then you should say nothing at all. Then it should be like regular kosher and treif. So, but the Shulchan says like, somehow, since it's a touch relating din, so therefore it's if it's touching. Okay, so if you want to say it's like it's touched, but touch should make it then treif. Not why should it be mixed together? No, mixed together that's our siman, and mixed together is only the chatil, not the evid. But over there it's very for real. It's as if it's mixed together and makes it treif. But if it's bot b'shishim, it's mutter. So again, something we're missing here. So somehow this connection. There's two details that are, of that din that are not like our din. The din of Nitzuk Chibur for us is that it makes it completely treif, and it's also only if it's hot on the bottom, cold on the top. But we look over there, all of a sudden it's not what's going on there. We turn to Siman Kuf Chav, I don't know, Vav, and all of a sudden Kuf Chav Vav, and over there it's talking about as if it's mixed. That's not our din, and it has nothing to do with hot and cold. No one says hot and cold over there. So again, something's fishy, something's funny over here, something we're missing. Can I say that about why how that did in Nitzuk Chibur, which comes from our same Mishnah Machshirin, and we're saying it's only wine and tumah that it applies to. Those are the same, and kosher treif is only lechatchila. Lachar, the din of wine didn't come out the way sort of we expected it.
Is it maybe the guy is holding the wine? So we say it's like the guy is touching.
Okay, let's say. So what would happen then? If he touched it, it would all become treif. Why? It wouldn't say that. Let's say there's only 1 ounce in the cup here and there's 50 ounces on the top. We wouldn't look at Bitul. He touched it. Touch is touch. Who cares what it did? And it should depend on hot and cold. It should depend on hot and cold, right? We have these rules about hot and cold. There's no hot and cold rules over there, right? Wine is not. It doesn't say anything there about hot and cold. So it's like a.
No, that would explain why you don't need hot and. No, you wouldn't.
No, because
you should need hot and cold.
Because then Machshir and Tumah V'Tayra has nothing to do with it. Also, is hot and cold. That's what the din says. It depends hot on the bottom, cold on the top. So, anyhow, so a little questions here at this stuff here.